Hello. Let me check the various places that I'm beaming this out to. We had a few tech issues this morning. They are technical comments. We had a few tech issues this morning. Internet issues, sound issues. Clive had to jump off at a hard stop around about 11 today, so I'm going to do this on my own and I'm going to see if this is working. And funnily enough, all of my streaming stats look nice and healthy and blue as opposed to red like they were earlier. So I'm going to write a couple of comments. Just trying to figure out where I'm beaming this to. So this should be in the Making Finance Fun Facebook group. It should be on my NDC business page, and it should be on my LinkedIn page. It might even be in Clive's Facebook group as well. Say hi. Say hi if you're here live. Cool. I think we're all good. So if you are joining this live, I mean, look, the recording, I'm going to be editing this and making it a bit more polished, although it will just be me on the YouTubes and everywhere else. But if you are joining us live on Facebook or on LinkedIn, then say hi. Say hi if you're joining us live. If you've got any questions, let me know. This isn't going to be super long, right? The budget was not particularly great news for small business. It has some positive aspects for individuals, but we try and sort of tailor our content on the podcast towards small business. So we're going to be talking about, like, not everything, but various bits and pieces in terms of what was announced. And I must admit, I didn't watch it. Probably the first time I've not watched it live since having the business, since starting the business. So I heard some stories about how it came across and how raucous it was. I was off site all day Wednesday at various meetings, and so yes, I wasn't. Actually, what I did do Wednesday morning was our latest Brave Networking Business Club event in Weston-super-Mare. One of the best ones yet. Full house, 25 people, two amazing speakers. Jacob, who does short form video content, and Steve, who does motivational speaking, life transformation stuff. It was incredible. It was really, really cool. So that was my Wednesday morning, and then I went to Cheltenham for a client meeting at a veterinary practice, which took me back a few years from my background. So yes, I think I'm just double checking everything here. It looks good. It looks good. I'm coming through on LinkedIn. I'm coming through on Facebook. So I've got some notes here. Let me just bring my notes up on my screen. I've got some notes in terms of what was announced. I also watched James Sinclair's live budget announcement. Well, it was live on Wednesday. I watched it yesterday. And he came up with some really interesting points that I wanted to sort of delve into a little bit as well. So yeah, where should we start? Let's start with people's salaries. So in terms of the national minimum wage, that increased, and well, I say that increased, it will increase from April 2026, so the 26-27 financial year. And the bandings are, so over 21-year-olds, it has increased to £12.71 an hour. Excuse me, that's an increase of about 4%, just over 4%. 18 to 20-year-olds, it increased to £10.45 an hour. Much bigger increase. That's about an 8.5% increase. And 16 to 17-year-olds increased to £8 an hour, which is about a 6% increase. So, like, the increases haven't been particularly kind of proportionate for whatever reason. And this was announced on James's podcast a couple of days ago. He seemed to think that maybe the political parties are trying to buy some votes by increasing a certain banding of national minimum wage. Whether that's true or not, I don't really know. I mean, what I will say, preface kind of all of this, I don't really follow politics. The only time I have a mild inkling of interest in politics is the budget or an autumn statement or whatever, where we've got to give some information out to clients. and about some rules and thresholds and whatever else tax rates that are changing. That is the only time that A, I follow politics, or B, I even watch the news. I don't watch the news at all. So yes, national minimum wage increases have gone up. I think, like for my business, I'm very fortunate that I can afford to pay my team more than national minimum wage, and in some cases a lot more. And this won't affect us, but I think there will be certain industries where this will affect quite a bit. I'm thinking hospitality. I'm thinking uh, areas where perhaps there's a populace of relatively, I say unskilled. That's probably not a fair phrase, but think of like hospitality, you think of leisure, maybe you think of kind of retail to a degree, specifically like supermarkets and stuff. Probably paying towards kind of the lower end of kind of towards minimum wage, and so therefore, a lot of industries, a lot of businesses in those sectors, professions, industries will feel this quite a lot. And if you think about like a small like coffee shop or something like that, where they're turning over maybe a couple of $100,000 a year. If they're being serviced by, I don't know, half a dozen baristas, for example, and I'm not talking about like your Costas or your Starbucks, but like your small independents, then typically they may have most of their staff in and around national minimum wage. So if they're putting up, in some cases up to 8.5% in terms of the hourly rate, and then all of the follow-on taxes that follow with that, like national insurance, like pension contributions, etc., etc., then that's going to be massive, massive increase to what is already kind of tight margins. If somebody's salary bill is 100K for the year and they're turning over 200,000 and they've got another 8% on top, then that's what, 8.5 or whatever the number is. That's almost another 10,000 that they've got to find. But it's not just 10,000. If they're doing margins of, I don't know, like 50%, for example, it's not 10,000 they need to find, it's 20 to make it comparable. So it's it's quite a, I don't know, kind of, so what I said, like on the personal side, I mean, that's benefiting people that are on a lower wage, but in terms of small business, it's not incentivizing as much, in terms of the rate of the increase. It's not incentivizing businesses to go out and employ people to want to grow. And that's just one of many things that were announced that weren't particularly great. So that's on the national minimum wage. What else have we got? We have got, and I'm going to be dipping in and out of all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to I just got notes like a brain dump on my screen here. So kind of slightly related to that, national insurance. So I believe that there's going to be national insurance relief on the first £2,000 of pension contributions via salary sacrifice, but that's capped, and so therefore, if you contribute more via salary sacrifice to your pension, then you'll have to pay national insurance on that. And I don't think necessarily, not talking lots and lots of money, but it is an additional tax where people are trying to do good. People are trying to, kind of be smart with how they earn money, be through salary sacrifice, be it through contributing to a pension for their longer term future. And it feels like it's been a little bit of a stab in terms of that being taxed. So will it stop people contributing more to their pension? I don't know. Maybe. I would suggest probably not. In the grand scheme of things, I guess it just depends on how much you contribute. But that was something that was mentioned. Income tax thresholds are being frozen for another 3 years, I think, from 2027. So I think it was meant to be reviewed then. I think it's now 2030. And I'm going to caveat a lot of these kind of forward planning future ones with the fact that the government might not even be in Parliament by that point. It could be another party. It could be more rules. So I think the messaging around some of these future ones is that, yeah, it's been announced, it's coming, but kind of almost don't worry about it too much right now. I wouldn't even necessarily say plan too much for it right now, especially for 2 years' time. Maybe think about it in a year's time, 18 months' time, but it might not happen. But yes, income tax thresholds are freezing. And there was also another freezer around, I think, the student loan repayment threshold as well. And so, what happens if you're pushing salaries up and people are earning more money? They're going to be caught in, higher rate tax brackets. and therefore paying more tax. So even though kind of it doesn't feel like they call it, what they call it, like a stealth tax or something, it's not necessarily an increase of tax, but the grand scheme thing is if you're earning more money, you're going to fall into a higher rate, and more of your income is going to be taxed at a higher rate. So it kind of is higher tax. And the same thing with student loans. So the student loan thresholds for repaying are frozen. So if you're earning more money, then you're going to be higher above that threshold and therefore paying more percentage back. And back when I had my student loan, I think it was like something like 24,000 pound a year that you could earn without paying anything back. And then every pound over that, you paid back, I don't know, like 3 or 4%. So I think it's kind of similar to that. I think the threshold might be like 25k now or something. But yeah, that was on that. What else do we have? We have anything else like vaguely kind of employment related? I don't. Well, yeah, income taxes have increased both for dividends and property. So with property, you'd get taxed at a similar rate to income tax at 20% basic, 40% higher rate. That's going to be 22 and 42%. So if you own properties personally, you're going to be paying an extra 2% of income tax. I'm led to believe the additional rates, so what is it, like 45% over 150k, that will not change. So it's only the basic and the higher rates that are going up by 2%. And the same for dividends. So I remember, I think, was it just when I started the business, like dividends was 7.5% at basic rate, and now they're 8.75% at basic rate. They're going up to 10.75% from, and this is from April 2026. So this is something that's going to come in relatively soon. And so I'm probably going to be having some conversations around kind of extraction strategies and what's the best way. Do they take more of a salary? I think the general consensus is like, the rhetoric for us is kind of, if you can live within that 50k ish basic rate tax threshold, then keep it to kind of within that. You're going to suffer an extra couple of percent on tax, but it's the world we live in right now. We're going to have to pay for some of this COVID stuff that not all of us received, like me. But I think for the short term, it's going to be an additional amount of tax. And I think I did the sums. So like a married couple, if they both took out 50k each and they had a 12-ish grand salary, I think it works out like an extra £1,500 a year in income tax between the two of them. So if you're a solopreneur, single director business, it's going to be about 750 quid extra tax a year. So yeah, need to think about that for future forecasts. And if you're paying for your personal tax out of your company, like that's going to be follow-on dividend impact for the following year. So kind of a bit of more planning around what money is being sandbanked for personal taxes, I think we'll need to do. But like, I think, and again, I don't get too het up with rumours, specifically with budgets. I wait for stuff to get announced, hence why we're doing this today. And I'll be doing emails and blog posts and other bits and pieces over the course of the next week whilst we digest everything and kind of relay it, because we just don't know until things have been confirmed. So things have been confirmed. This is why we're doing this. Cool. So yeah, 2% dividends. It's not particularly ideal. I guess in theory it could have been a lot worse. Could have been more. But yeah, so that's from April 2026, and again the additional rate is unchanged for that as well. Just kind of staying on the property, they have announced, I think they've called it a mansion tax, which I don't know, it's a stupid name for it, to be honest. So where's my notes on this? Yeah, so if you've got a property that's over £2 million in value, then there will be some form of tax. Now, this isn't coming in until April 2028, allegedly, and so therefore this might not happen. I think the consensus is it may or may not. It's only going to be valid if you own a property of that value. And again, the value is probably going to be subjective, because like if you bought a house 30 years ago for £1 million, let's say, and now it's worth £2.5 million, then that hasn't been realised. So I'm not entirely sure. I think it'd be something on like the council tax bandings where you've got like a rateable value. So how it's worked out, I'm not exactly sure, or don't know how that's going to happen. I guess, or I assume that there will be some sort of an assessment And so, like, for example, for business rates, you can get business rates reassessed if there's a material change of the property, or if you think that it's not right. So I expect there'll be some people that have, if this comes in, I expect there'll be some people that have a property or have properties in and around that kind of value that will cause a lot of noise and a lot of kind of traffic to the government in order to potentially get them reassessed to be under. I'm in the southwest. There are properties of that value around here. They're not as common. I guess if you're further north, not as common again. But yeah, I guess if you're in London or kind of the suburbs, then it doesn't take an awful big property to kind of hit that valuation. So yeah, so that's that. It's called the mansion tax, and it's coming apparently from April 2028. Um, and kind of on that sort of council tax business rates, I don't think it was kind of announced per se. There's some sort of like rhetoric around there is going to be a top banding or an additional banding of business rates that are going to be brought in. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I've heard rumours of a £500,000 rateable value. So over and above that, then businesses will get an additional amount of business tax to pay if the rateable value of their office, shop, etc., property, building is over £500,000. And so that's probably gonna curtail people from wanting to go into offices or wanting to kind of trade on the high street even more. And I think what will probably happen is, we've got the likes of Cribs Causeway here in Bristol, and we've got tenants in there that are like, oh, I can't even remember who, like John Lewis are in there, Marks and Spencers maybe. There's a few high ticket ones with big square footage with big rateable values. Like if they decide to shut down shops or move out, then that could kill the rest of the complex. And the same with the high street, I guess. If the main attractors like your Primarks, like I don't do an awful lot of shopping, so I don't really know what's kind of like Currys or people like that, retailers like that. If they decide to come out, they're not going to draw the people to those locations that will then go subsequently to the smaller locations. If the big ones go, what's going to happen to the small ones? So, and going through something at the moment, it doesn't need to necessarily be a big shop or office or whatever to hit that rateable value. So we'll see. That wasn't necessarily there's no like dates on that, so that's just something to be kind of mindful of. How are we doing? Cool. So what else have we got? EOTs. This is something I'm really interested in. Employee ownership trusts. Again, more relevant for small business. Because my main aim is to want to sell my business to my team, preferably through something like an employee ownership trust, whereby the trust owns the business and the employees are the beneficiaries of said trust. It's historically been very tax efficient for people that are wanting to sell their business. Now, I'll caveat this with the fact that this is people that own their business personally, as opposed to maybe people that own their business through a holdings company, because personal for capital gains tax, holding company, limited companies don't suffer capital gains tax. So there's kind of there's little delineations there between the ownership structure. But if you were a person and you owned £1 million business and you wanted to, let's say, sell it for £1 million to through an employee ownership trust. Now, depending on the mechanics of the deal, you could take that £1 million in free cash from the business and pay absolutely zero capital gains tax whatsoever. So an EAT was very, very tax efficient historically. I think when it works well, it works very well, because you're building a culture of a team to want to carry on the business, to deliver the great products and services that you deliver in a consistent way. It's great for the team because they've then got something that they part own, and so therefore they have some direction of control and some ownership. So like financially for them longer term, it's really advantageous, but also from like a career perspective, it could be really super cool. And from the vendors, from the sellers, it's great because it's really tax advantageous, and it kind of protects longer term interest, because there's nothing worse than a third party buying your business and cocking everything up. And therefore, if you say, for example, you sell it for 50% upfront and then the other 50% over 10 years, That 10-year 50% could be at risk if parameters change, like numbers drop off a cliff, clients leave, staff aren't happy, etc., etc. So very, very tax advantageous historically, but it's no longer 100% tax relief. It's now 50% tax relief, and this is something that's happened as of Wednesday. So it's an immediate change to the policy from government. So now, if you had £1 million business and you wanted to take that £1 million out all in one go, then 50%, and this is on the gain. I would say this is on the gain. So if you've bought a business and then sold it, it'll be on the gain. But if you created it from scratch, then whatever you sell it for, that's the full value. So on the £1 million, for example, you'd be charged, or you'd be taxed, capital gains tax at 50%. So you wouldn't be taxed on so before you were taxed on nothing. Now you're being taxed on $500,000 in this example, because it's 50% of the 1 million full sales price in this example. Capital gains tax, I'm led to believe, is 14%. Capital gains tax, 14% basic rate, 24% higher rate. I think 24% is the upper echelon. And so you could be paying 24% on $500,000, which is what? Let's do the maths. What's that? 125 grand? Is that right? Yeah, something like that. So Tuesday you would have paid no tax. Wednesday you would have paid £125,000 tax. Is it still tax advantageous to do an EAT if you want to sell your business? I think so. Yes. In that context of scenario, my situation is different for what I want to do. I will still definitely want to do that. Who knows? Like, government may change policy again in the future. It may revert back to 100% tax-free. But like I said, when it works well, it works very well. It has been abused, I think, a little bit, and maybe that's perhaps why they've wanted to do that. But something that wasn't announced, it was announced in the previous kind of budget autumn statement in terms of what's they call it? Entrepreneurs relief. It's called business asset disposal relief now. That used to be 10% as a capped taxed amount. That then went up to 14%. That goes up to 18% in April 2026. And so they've almost doubled that in the space of a year. If you wanted to sell so that's if you want to sell to a third party. So if an EAT is not relevant for you, you want to sell on the open market, business asset disposal relief has gone up from 10% to 18% coming up. So they've almost doubled that. They've obviously they put tax up in terms of the EAT side of things. So like, if you want to exit your business, it's becoming a bit more costly. Which, when we're the guys, the small business owners that are taking the risks, managing the cash flow day by day, giving people careers, managing payroll, giving other suppliers cash flow, delivering, in my case, delivering a service to 625 small business clients and individuals, like I believe to a very, very high degree. That's all of those things are positive. What we're trying to do to the economy, what we're trying to do locally, what we're trying to do to people by hiring. And you might have seen I've hired 5 people in the last 2 months. We've gone through a really big growth spurt, and we're actually hiring for the future. So a couple of these roles are kind of more forward thinking. If I was negative about this, I would be like, well, national minimum wage is going up, employers' national insurance went up recently, and now they're taxing me more to exit my business. So I'm just going to sit on what I've got, like ride it out, maybe wait till the next announcement, the next party, whatever. And so when the Chancellor are trying to give the impression that they're wanting to grow the economy, then us small business owners are one of the biggest, if not the biggest lever to help grow that economy. We employ, 60% of the national workforce between us all. Is it like 5 or 6 million businesses? I don't know the exact stats, but they seem to be quite punitive towards us from a tax point of view, and we're the ones that are trying to help grow everything. So it doesn't quite stack up. But yeah, that's it on EATs. I'll get off my soapbox on that. What else have I not mentioned? There's some stuff around VCTs. So VCTs are kind of like an investment strategy whereby historically you could invest some of your personal capital into venture capital trust. I think that's what it stands for. It's kind of like pension funds and kind of that kind of thing, where you invest in something, you hope it does well, and you kind of get a return. VCT is a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more risky, and so the government said historically, if you funded or if you contributed to a VCT, then we would give you a 30% tax rebate on your self-assessment. Not only do you get 30% tax rebate, but all of the money. So let's say, for example, you put in £5,000 in 5 years' time, because they go in cycles. I think it's 3 or 5 years. After 3 or 5 years, you get, what did I say? So you invest £5,000, you get 10 grand back. That £5,000 gain is untaxed, I'm led to believe. So you get that tax free. And also every year that it's invested, you get paid a dividend if applicable. And that dividend is also tax free, so I believe. And so those two things are kind of staying the same, but you're not going to get a 30% tax rebate going forward. So you're only going to get a 20% tax rebate. Better than nothing. But again, this is an incentive to pump money back into the economy, back into high risk businesses that are younger, maybe more tech focused, in order to help grow those businesses, to help grow the economy, and to help facilitate things like AI, tech, like medical advancements, all of these kind of things that really do good things for us and will benefit the economy and the country in the longer term. We're now getting less of a tax rebate if you wanted to invest in these really cool things. So again, kind of double standards there in terms of wanting to make the economy grow, but then penalising the people that are trying to make it grow, in my opinion. I mentioned business rates. There's something about apprenticeship funding. Let me just see if I can see it on my other notes. I've got 2 pages of notes. Let me just have a quick look. Otherwise, I can. We've mentioned about property. We've mentioned about business asset disposal relief. Yeah, so that goes up to 18% from April 2026. There was something around pension. I mentioned about pension just now. I'm not a pensions advisor, so I definitely recommend talking to an independent financial advisor. But apparently pension pots will move into the scope of inheritance tax from April 2027. So all sorts of thresholds around inheritance tax. I'm not going to go too much into that, but yeah, unspent pension pots are moving into the scope of that, allegedly. There was some bits and pieces around first year allowances. Again, I'm not going to delve too much into that because a lot of it was very, very kind of small stuff, and a lot of it is not necessarily particularly relevant. Like I said, I'll be doing a blog post, probably put more detail on that you can see on the website, and I'll be sending emails to clients as well with a bit of a brief blurb that you can then with a link to the website. Motoring. Well, so yeah, this was interesting because I have an electric car. I've had an electric car for 18 months now, and I have mixed feelings on my electric vehicle, which if you've been following my socials, you would have seen recently about my Audi, a new battery on my Audi. Apparently, there is going to be a levy from April 2028. So again, this is something that may not happen, but you're going to be charged per mile if you've got an electric or hybrid car. And the rates, where have I lost my place? The rates are 3 pence per mile for electric and 1.5 pence per mile on hybrid cars. So, yeah, if you're, I mean, typically speaking, I'm generalizing a little bit here, but if you've got an electric vehicle, I mean, the range of mine is about 280 miles. I don't necessarily do too many long journeys. I don't do that much in the way of mileage at all, if I'm being honest. But if you're doing, I don't know, relatively large amounts of mileage, albeit short journeys, then you're going to be taxed potentially 3 pence per mile. I guess it's not a huge amount. I mean, yeah, 3 pence per mile. What did I do? Well, I didn't do it the other day, but I had a 100-mile round trip. So what would that have been? Like an extra £3? Is that right? I should know this being an accountant. An extra £3 on the journey. It's not a huge amount, is it? Considering I probably would have paid like 20 quid in diesel, maybe, to do that trip. And it cost me probably, almost a third of a charge. Charge cost me about £8. So it probably would have cost me 3 or 4 quid in electric to do the trip. So it's doubling my cost, of which is quite a small cost. So it's going to be £6 instead of 20. So you're still saving a lot of money with electric. You're still doing the right things for the environment. But yeah, if you want to do the right things for the environment, you're going to have to pay more for the privilege by the sounds of it. It might not come in, I don't know. Um, but yeah, and there's going to be some increases, I think, with like, there's something to do with passenger duty as well in airplanes. I'm just having a quick look on my screen. Yeah, there's some sort of air passenger duty that increases in April 2027. So if you're flying a lot, then you probably have to pay more in airport, airline, air passenger taxes. And if you've got a private jet, then there's some sort of higher rate that's being extended if you've got a private jet over 5.7 tons. So all of you people with private jets, you probably have to pay a bit more there as well. There were some other things. We've got a couple of clients in the alcohol trade, and they're not particularly happy. I mean, I think the alcohol duty per se was frozen, was it? I think I'm just having a quick look. I can't quite see that on the screen. But they're going to be really hit by business rates because the relief from business rates is coming away. I think they still get a little small bit from the last financial year. That's going away. They'll have to pay 100% now business rates. So they're going to be feeling that. Obviously, VAT was a contentious issue. There's no changes to that, but they were looking for maybe a reduced rate of VAT. People's salaries, which predominantly that factors the whole of the pub industry, right? So yeah, people paying more for their staff. So they're being squeezed massively, and people aren't really going to things like clubs and pubs as much as they used to. Our guys are doing quite well. They've got quite a unique proposition. All of our clients in this sector, they're not a traditional pub. And so they're doing better than kind of the normal, but they're still going to get hit as well. There was some stuff around public spending, so like efficiency bits and pieces around public services and things. I did feel it was quite a welfare kind of centric budget. They had that 2-child cap on, was it the child benefit? So they've reduced that. So if you've got more than 2 kids, you get more child benefit. Is that incentivizing people to have more kids? I don't know. I'm going to try and stay very politically neutral around kind of the whole topic. I've seen lots of things online where people are saying, oh, maybe taxing, like the business owners or the more wealthy or the people that are trying to deliver change, and actually you benefit the people that got loads of kids or maybe not working. And like, I got absolutely no kind of viewpoint on that whatsoever. I can see both sides from the arguments for sure. But yeah, it felt very kind of, maybe it's because it's a Labour government, kind of more pro welfare than anything else, possibly. I think there's some stuff around. Yeah, that wasn't really relevant. No, that's fine. I think that was pretty much. I pretty much said everything that I was going to say, and I've only been on for about half an hour, so. I hope that was okay. I'm going to break this recording down, like I said, into some various social media stuff and updates and bits and pieces, emails, all the other kind of jazz. Sorry Clive wasn't with me for this episode. He is Irish. I'm not going to hold that against him, but a lot of this stuff wasn't necessarily relevant for the Irish. And I think he was just going to ask a few questions around how this was going to impact people in kind of like a real scenario context. And I've given a few bits and pieces of that in terms of a flavour. So yeah, I hope that was cool. If you're watching a recording, feel free to ask some questions on any of the streams, any of the recordings. I'm more than happy to get out to people. If you want to email or like send a message through the social media channels, do that. If you're a client, you're going to get an email. Could do a website blog, and it'll go on YouTube probably relatively soon, I think. But that's it for now. Have a great weekend, and I will catch you. We're hopefully going to go live next week, providing all the tech works out. We haven't quite decided what we're going to do yet. It's the last couple of shows before Christmas. We'll probably wear some Christmas jumpers. We'll probably do something a bit humorous for the last one before Christmas. But yeah, check us out next Friday, 10 a.m, and we'll see you soon.